Hey everybody, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And when I was a kid, my parents would do the bedtime story thing. And some of the bedtime stories were like, Chronicles of Narnia and other kid books. I remember books of poetry and fairy tales and stuff like that. But we would also do stuff from the Bible pretty much every night. And that went in phases, from a really kiddish version of the Bible with a bunch of pictures to the boring grown-up version of the Bible where the only pictures are the maps at the end. But I remember one of those kid editions when I was maybe kindergarten, pre-kindergarten. There's this one account of this one miracle where they had this guy and they portrayed the dude with his arm just wrecked. I mean, it was shot. It was withered down into this tiny little thing, and it was twisted around and like kind of grotesque. At least at that age, it was a pretty scary image because it looked so deformed and foreign. And then Dad, read through the story, and of course, the guy's hand gets healed by Jesus, and in the next picture, it's better. And I remember doing the jaw on the floor thing and making Dad stop reading. And I was like, how did everybody not believe in Jesus after that, Dad? And, Dad tried to be theological and pastorally because that was and still is his job. But he had no answer that could convince my 5-year-old self that people could possibly see that happen and not believe. And as a result, this is maybe the miracle that has captured my imagination more than any other when I look at the Bible. This is an amazing break the laws of time and space right in front of your eyes kind of miracle. And in my 5th grade brain, the equation was very simple. If a person saw that happen, they would need to believe whatever the person who did it said, because that person knows something the rest of us don't know. What did not stand out to me or stick with me as a kid reading that picture Bible with my dad is that the real controversy here wasn't about whether or not the guy's arm got healed. The text treats that like it's not in dispute at all. And I guess if you wanted to go ask the people who were there, you could go ask about the guy's hand was wrecked and then it just came back to life in one instant. No, the real point of the passage, like the passage we just got done looking at over the last week, is the Sabbath controversy, the ratcheting tension between Jesus and the Pharisees. But before we go back and spend more time on the whole Sabbath thing, I'm going to give us a little Sabbath from the Sabbath, because we've been talking about that a lot. I just want to deal with the miracle that is described in the following passage. Behold, Matthew 12, starting in verse 9. Going on from that place, he, Jesus, went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, they asked him, "Hey, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? Therefore it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. By now, you know the rhythm of this thing. It's going to take a few days to process through all of that. Let's just get the nuts and bolts of the narrative down right now. So going on from that place, there's another one of those Matthew chronological hint phrases that indicates that we are moving in direct chronological succession from what happened before. So chapter 12 opens with a chronological break from chapter 11. You remember chapter 11 ended with that stuff about all, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And then chapter 12 opens with, at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields, meaning that, okay, what you're about to see should be interpreted thematically in light of what you just read, but it isn't necessarily chronologically immediate. But then the jump from that anecdote where they're out in the fields and they're rubbing together grain in their hands, and yes, I literally make the rub together grain in my hands gesture every single time I talk about it, even though this is an entirely audio medium. So we get past that scene that we spent the last week on, and then we get going on from that place, he went into their synagogue. So very chronologically, necessarily, next thing, Jesus goes from the grain fields, presumably outside of Capernaum, into the synagogue in Capernaum. I've been to that synagogue. It's kind of fun whenever stuff in the Bible happens in places where I've hung around for extended periods of time. The version of the synagogue that you see when you go there now is a couple remodels after the version of the synagogue that Jesus was in, but it's in the same place. It's not going anywhere. The pictures are probably on the wall of all of the grand poobahs of the synagogue at Capernaum. It's the same building. It's the same tradition. It's pretty cool to think that, hey, I've been in the place where a miracle that broke the laws of time and space like this is purported to have happened. So he's in the synagogue, and what happens in the synagogue? This is almost like a temple embassy that each town that's lucky enough to have a synagogue would have as like a microcosm, a mini representation of the larger conversation about the law that's been going on through the whole Second Temple period at the temple in Jerusalem. The synagogue is a tradition that picked up steam by necessity during the exile in Persia and Babylon, and again became a diasporatic micro-expression of the larger conversation going on at the temple. So he's now in the place that is the local representation of the thing he just chronologically got done saying that he is greater than. Remember, in the previous passage, Jesus said that he's greater than David, he's greater than the temple, and he's greater than the Sabbath. So here he is on the Sabbath day that he just got done claiming to be greater than, in an extension of the temple that he just got done claiming to be greater than, and we is going to have an issue. And a man with a shriveled hand was there. It's almost like bait. Like, hey, shriveled hand guy, could you just stand right over there in that shadowy spot? Huh? What? Yeah, sure. No, a little bit that way on that X? Cool. Bring Jesus in. Hey, Jesus, how you doing? We're just here at the synagogue where we work. Oh, what's that over there on that X? That guy looks like he could sure use a healing. What are you going to do, Jesus? Looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, they asked him, hey, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And then he says to them the stuff about the sheep falling into the pit. And we're going to talk more about this little intellectual tete-a-tete, the bit of idea ball that they're playing right here. But get to the miracle. Then, verse 13, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. So this follows a really similar pattern to it's 9, right? It's got to be 9. Yeah, the beginning of chapter 9. So Jesus gets back over toward Capernaum, and remember some people brought in that paralytic. Jesus is teaching, and it's like, oh, here we go again. There's the bait. What's Jesus going to do? And he's like, hey, take heart, son, your sins are forgiven. What? There's another thing you can't do. You can't do that. This is blasphemy. And Jesus is like, okay, first I'm going to respond to your dumb remarks, and then to illustrate this theological truth through the breaking of the laws of time and space miraculously, I'm going to go ahead and heal this guy. And then in that passage in Matthew chapter 9, Jesus famously uses the formula. You remember it. He says, but so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. Then he said to the paralytic, get up, take your mat, and go home. And the guy gets up, and he's healed, and everybody's like, what? That's amazing. How does that even happen? And again, it's one of those break the laws of time and space. What are you going to do with that kind of miracles? Because that just happened in front of your face. Same thing. Jesus responds to their stuff, which we'll get to later. And then he's like, all right, well, let's do this thing. He's making a theological point. It isn't just a random, I really, care about all the people, but most of all, I care about you, shriveled hand guy. So I guess you get your hand back. Everybody else, I don't know, you're not getting miracles today. No, he's making a point with this. He's always making a point when he does something miraculous. If you don't believe me, just read through the whole New Testament and look for it. It's right there, and it is 100% of the time. But back to 5-year-old brain me. If this actually happened, why didn't everybody just fall on their face in total humiliation and be like, everything I thought I understood about the world just changed? That thing was all twisted up and weird and screwy, and I just watched sinews and tendons and muscles knit back together. I watched matter appear out of non-matter to take your busted up, broken, shriveled, that means less, hand, and to have it restored to the size and form and function symmetrically with the other hand. If I saw that happen now, as entrenched as I am in the rules of the natural world, the predictability of the natural world, guys, I don't even know what I would do. I guess it would depend on what went along with it and what the little speech was before it and what that person was advocating for. But nothing like that happens. And I've never heard of any credible claim of something like that occurring. I know that some of you, my friends, are from a tradition that believes that more miraculous things happen all the time. I don't know, maybe, but I have to admit, it is weird to me that your tradition doesn't seem to produce a lot of very tangible stuff, that if it's as real as this, people should be able to go and look at it with like a stethoscope and a ruler and photographic evidence and be like, oh no, definitely matter appeared out of non-matter. That stuff should be on camera. Everybody has a camera. Where is it? Now, I think this is special. I think this is different. And maybe more subtle, miraculous stuff still happens. Maybe I've just never been standing in the right place at the right time. But this, to me, stands out as amazing and paradigm changing. like the moment when you're looking down the alley on that home video footage from Brazil in Signs, and that big lanky green alien walks by, and the first time you see it, you just go, I mean, it takes your breath away. Everything just changed. I mean, there's an alien. It's real. I just saw it. It was on America's Funniest Home Video style VHS guy. It's right there at that kid's birthday party. Are you kidding? And it's masterful. But here, the text is holding it out as though this actually happened. Well, let's quickly explore the possibilities here. One, it didn't happen. This is a later text that is describing something that is legendary and heroic or Homeric, like the old Greek heroes of yore who did things that everybody knew in the original audience were completely preposterous, but somehow it was illustrating a point. Could be. Lots of people think that. It could be that we just simply don't understand the language, and maybe it wasn't as dramatic as that painting I saw in my children's Bible. Maybe it's not as dramatic as the language makes it sound. I don't normally go through any kind of commentary stuff in preparing for this conversation. I really want it to just be raw and untainted with you. But I looked at a bunch of them this time around. I was like, what do people do with this? And the answer is avoid it. A bunch of really reputable, really good New Testament scholars focus heavily in their chapters on this content, on the Sabbath controversy and all of that business. And then they're like, and then Jesus healed him. And that's it. Like one sentence, nothing. A third possibility is that it did happen exactly as described. And that was baffling to everybody who saw it. And because they didn't know what to do with it, and because they were so entrenched in what they already thought, that rather than this causing some kind of mass repentance, it instead caused everybody to double down on the positions they already held. That's something that we're going to break down on the epistemological level a little bit more in the next couple of episodes as we look at the Sabbath controversy and revisit the implications of this shocking healing. Thank you for supporting me on patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. Every time I go over there and check in and see that people continue to do that, I'm humbled, and it kind of breaks my brain a little bit because it's free. You don't have to support anything at all if you don't want to, but you do. And it sure helps with my family stuff and keeping me energized to stay after this. So thank you. You are awesome. If you don't support the podcast at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast, you are still awesome. Thanks for listening to this thing and hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10 Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do it again soon.